The $1,000,000 question. Do you believe that a higher form of non-human intelligence has visited this planet?
Right. So non-human intelligence exists. Non-human intelligence has been interacting with humanity. This interaction is not new, and it's been ongoing. And there are unelected people in the government that are aware of that.
Hey, Inspire Tribe, my fellow freedom lovers. Look whom the cat dragged into a new episode of the Naked Truth Show. Frank Jacob, how's it going, brother?
It's going pretty good, John. That cat dragged in analogy is pretty funny. I just had a cat outside my window that dragged something in, but it wasn't me. But yeah, how the hell are you?
I'm great, thank you. We are fully locked and loaded for this new show. I'm so glad we're doing this now. You've just been traveling. You've been on the road. You were here in the States. We didn't get to see each other because you were busy on the other coast. But how was your trip, my friend? And can we do this more often now? This Naked Truth thing.
Okay, which question first? I guess the naked truth thing more often. Now that I'm back, I guess that would be the right way to answer it. I look forward to doing these more often. It's just been, once we decided to do this thing, there was just such a monumental amount of things that were on the table already, in progress already, that I had to honor. And these are kind of now finally sort of drifting into the rear view mirror of the automobile.
Listen to this poet here, man.
Yeah, and speaking of rear view mirror, I mean, that's kind of what this whole trip was, and it was an amazing trip. It was over 3,000 kilometers that we traveled in a car, and looking in the rear view mirror now, starting in Arizona, going to Nevada, to film with Brad Olson, and we were doing some little clips on giants, right, which is an interesting subject, and it was just really fascinating. It ended up getting us all the way to Area 51, totally by accident. It was I love those kinds of trips where you kind of don't really plan it. It wasn't like, well, let's go to Area 51, like 10 years after it was a subject. It was more like, let's figure out where we can stay somewhere between this far end of the state and this end where we're going to. And right there, whoa, look at that. It's called Extraterrestrial Highway. What's that all about? Well, there we were at Area 51. So we had to go. We had to go stay in Area 51, right?
Any experiences that were notable?
Well, yeah, I mean, absolutely. I could say we had some experiences, like, just, one of the things that was fascinating to me, if I just go in chronological order about what we learned on this trip, which is, I think, significant, is, we talked about the giants. And one thing people in America don't really realize is the extent to which the culture of giants, the history of giants plays a role there, because it's more or less been flushed under the rug or shoved under the rug by the Smithsonian Institute, which we know now recently was caught kind of red-handed, admitting that they destroyed evidence of these giants, right? So what you find out, and I can put a couple of shots up here on the screen just to make it interesting. We have here at about 5,500 feet elevation in the Nevada desert, high in the mountains, just east of the Sierra Nevadas, we have something called Lovelock Cave. And Lovelock Cave is in an area that previously, as you see at the top of that diagram there, is like they were showing 10,000 years ago, 5,000 years ago, 1,000 years ago. Essentially, there was a giant lake there that totally covered. It was like 1,000 feet deep. And there was a total different ecosystem at the top of these mountains. And it was at that time that this culture existed between giants and at the same time regular sized humans. And there's a whole story about kind of their interaction with one another, which ended up in a kind of a battle on behalf of the humans to lock them into a cave and get rid of them, right? So, and here you have a picture of Tanya and Brad. They're looking out over, you get an idea. This is the bottom of a lake bed there, and that goes off into, hundreds of miles into the distance, right? That whole plateau up there is just incredible, right? So, but anyway, long story short, we did all that. We filmed all this stuff, and then lo and behold, we pulled up in this little town in the middle of nowhere, in a place called Rachel. It's kind of like a 3-home town, like actually 3-trailer town more than anything. And there's a place there called the Little Ailey Inn, and you can.
There you go.
They had to call it the Little Alien. What else, right? So you've got these trailers there, and you got these far out sort of types that are sitting around at night discussing these things. And in the place itself, there's like, pictures of who's all been there, and you see some at the top of that on the right, you see pictures of decals that have been left behind or gathered over the last decades of secret projects that have taken place in America. And while we were spending the night there, actually, what was interesting is that we had paranormal experiences, and it started off with us sitting, like just arriving after they had actually closed check-in. There was no one around, and we were told there was just an envelope with a key. And it turns out that they gave us the wrong key. But by fluke, there was one guy still sitting there. His name is George. And he was actually not supposed to be there. He said he was going to leave hours earlier. He was up all night. He was tired, but something told him in his head, he had this little voice that said, I should stick around a bit longer. And he stuck around just long enough for us to pull up. And it turns out he knew how to get us the key that we were missing. So, that's kind of how it started. And then we were sitting around, and these people rolled up, and we got into these discussions about Area 51 and UFO activity and what had happened there recently, anything they knew about, etc. And then the motion light went on at the trailer that we were supposed to be sleeping in. And we all looked over and realized, well, there was nobody there to trigger the motion light. That's kind of weird. So anyway, long story short, at the end of we were done the conversation, we headed to the trailer, and we were expecting the motion light to come on. Well, guess what happened? Didn't come on. So we go in the trailer, right? We're thinking, okay, well, maybe there wasn't a motion. Was there a motion light? Wasn't there a motion light? And then it all starts. Like, this is now midnight, and every 10 minutes, the light comes on. The light goes off. The light comes on. And meanwhile, I passed out. Tanya was experiencing this on and off stuff the whole time. And then I woke up at 3:00 in the morning, and I had these incredible downloads, and I heard this sound like I thought was a truck pulling up, because this thing's right beside of a highway, right? And usually when a truck would come on a highway like that, you hear the typical crescendo, right? From the distance, it gets loud, and then it fades out, right? Well, this truck reached the crescendo, and then I realized I was listening to it going, it doesn't sound like a truck. That sounds more like a B-52 or something weird. And it was not going away. It was like, it reached the crescendo right over us, and it stayed. And I was like, is this going to go off? Is this going to keep going? Maybe this isn't a truck. So I got out my phone, and I made a screenshot of the time, which was 3:18 at that point. And I made a note of it, thinking, well, if it really was something weird, then maybe other people have registered it, so I'll have that record tomorrow to share with people. And then I went back to sleep again, but it was weird. There was tapping sounds on the window. There was knocking sounds on the door. Someone walked up to the trailer and knocked on the door. Okay, I swear, this is all stuff that took place. And we were thinking, I was so lazy to get out of bed and tired. I was like, all right, whatever you got to do, have fun. If you're doing your experimental flights, good luck with them. I'm too tired to get into it, right? And the next day, of course, we headed off, knowing that the Area 51 back gate entrance is there. So we ended up going to this back gate entrance, and here's a couple of pictures so you can get a gist of it. You drive down this road like endlessly, 10, 12 miles down this desert road leading to nowhere. And then you get to this facility with all these cameras and lights and all this weird stuff, and the sign saying, warning, do not photograph, right? So the guys that we met the night before were telling us, you can photograph there, no worries, no one's going to arrest you, you just can't cross 1 inch over this fence line. And so we're like, okay, we'll go with that. And I walked up to the fence line, and I got my film camera, and I'm taking pictures.
Were you tempted though, Frank? Were you tempted?
Well, yeah, we were actually tempted, but we were also worried we didn't really want to have to go to any kind of trouble to be booked and all this stuff. So we thought, we'll spare ourselves the stories we heard. But sure enough, while I was photographing and Tawny was a few feet away, all of a sudden there was this honk, like an aircraft or like one of those boat horns, right? It was so loud, I just about jumped out of my skin and fell over, right? And both of us were like, we just cracked up.
So what was it? What
That
was
was
it?
them, and they watch you. They're in that facility. They've got the camera eye on you, and they're paying very much attention. If you're gonna dare, and it was almost like they read my mind. I was reading the sign, going, "Well, you're not allowed to even film in this direction." Oh well, the guy said we could, so I'm filming in that direction. Like, boom! It was like, wow. And anyway,
They probably were reading your mind.
they probably were. You know, who's sitting behind the desk? That's the big question. In fact, that's the subject we're probably going to get to today, right? So the whole thing kind of wrapped by then. We left Area 51, took a venture through the Archon capital on planet Earth, Las Vegas, for a couple nights, and then we ended up in what we, you know, the goal of the whole thing was for us to actually go and
Sorry, that took me a moment. The Archon capital of the world.
oh, I could tell you,
That
I could
it did this to me where oh wait, there was something there. The arch
I could tell you stories about that too, but we can talk a whole show about that. In fact, we're going to talk about the Archon capital of the world when we get into the when I launch the webinar. That's going to be part of it. But anyway, look at this. So our last thing was this premiere of our crazy extraterrestrial species almanac documentary film. And it was amazing because this was at Contact in the Desert. There were thousands of people there. And this is a picture of the director, Craig Campobasso, and myself and Tanya Maidenford, who were doing a selfie in front of a pretty much like hundreds of people came to this presentation. And we were surprised because it was a presentation taking place over top of the main event of them, like their grand dinner party where awards ceremony. We thought, oh, well, what luck is that, right? But sure enough, we had actually people telling us that our film presentation was the highlight. The highlight.
There you go,
That's
Frank.
what you need
There
to
you
hear.
go.
That's what you need to hear, John, right? You need to hear it was the highlight of the event. And I'll gladly take that kudos on behalf of our production team because we've really busted our asses to get this film out there. And it was blowing people away. They were freaking out. They were freaking out because we have such vivid imagery in the film that they were having flashbacks. And they were coming up to us afterwards saying, man, that whole section right there, that just put me right back to, you know, to some memories that I've had, et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, so you realize that you're, you know, and so we camped out a few days, well, glamping, I guess is the proper way to describe it, luxury hotel venue, you know, so in this place that is 105 degrees Fahrenheit, where you walk through just the 50 yards between your hotel and the conference official, the temperature difference is like 40 degrees.
Oh yeah, I know all about it, man. I live in the South. You dread in summer. You wear a sweater indoors, not
Absolutely.
not
If
outdoors.
you don't have that sweater, man, you're gonna suffer. You're really gonna suffer. It was cold, absolutely. Yeah, so it was great. And we also had like a Q&A. I'll quickly show that. That was the final thing at the end. That was the climax. And you can see in this picture, which is shot, they had some weird blue ultraviolet light there. So we look kind of weird, but you see JJ Hertog, Desiree Hertog, Vivian Chauffet, you see Paul Hynek of Project Blue Book. You see Chris Bledsoe, you know, there's Craig, me, and Tanya in the back row. So it was actually really phenomenal. And I got to say, it was totally successful, that whole trip, even though it was 3,000 kilometers in 3 weeks of, you know, desert drive, you could say. Fascinating time.
Welcome to America. You know how it is. Just down the road is about 200 miles here. So it's just everything's a little bigger in America. So I'm glad you had a fantastic trip, Frank. And of course, this is sort of the teeing it up, what we're going to talk about today, which is disclosure, the current state of disclosure, and, you know, probably also our opinions around it and what other people are saying and why it matters at this time. But I honestly got to ask you something, Frank. 2 questions before we go into it, because we kind of need to frame it. And we've talked about this so much on our channel that I think we need to frame this. So, number 1, and this is you personally, do you think or believe that we are on a spinning ball racing through space, or is it something else? And then I have the second question for you. So, but that's sort of the framework, because it matters deeply about, you know, in terms of the discussion. What do you think?
Well, I know, I mean, what you're alluding to there is, of course, the contrasting opinion that we're on a flat Earth, or that we're in some kind of a dome, or in some kind of a fundament, or like firmament, you know, construct, whatever. You know, for me, like that model is as interesting as it is, and as deeply researched it is by many people. I still find too many problems with it, and I'm leaving that nut to crack to those people. In the meantime, I'm embracing the model that we actually are living in a solar system. Our solar system is part of an arm in the Milky Way galaxy, which is known as M42 from the Orion constellation, and that there is, in fact, a cosmic, an existence in the cosmos that exceeds even, of course, our galaxy and into multiple other galaxies. In fact, what interests me most in the most recent research I've done, also in connection with the webinar, the new webinar, is the idea of the story of creation itself, right? And there's various versions of that out there. So this is a topic which is very fascinating, and it leads, of course, to the idea that, well, where did we come from? Why are we here? And what is this construct around us? What is it all about, and where is it leading?
Well, I'm asking because I think this framework matters, and so we're taking sort of the current standard model as we're approaching this discussion today, and I accept that, because my honest answer to that question is I don't know. I don't know. I really don't know. There are things that I observe, and there's things that I see myself, and things that I hear others say, but I don't know. And for now I'm satisfied with that I simply don't know for sure. The other thing that I wanted to ask, and then we go straight into it, is even using this framework, could we potentially be currently in a simulation, or is there an electromagnetic grid that's at least making it almost impossible for us to see the entirety of truth that is available?
Well, now that is a topic that that opens up a couple of cans of worms.
No shit. Well, what else are we here for? We call this the naked truth, so at least we got to frame it, my friend. We got to frame
Well,
it.
okay, and my position on it is, at the moment, and I have every reason to believe that I'm getting very close. In fact, I think as after this trip had transpired, the downloads that I was getting during this trip were just really blowing my mind, and were fulfilling whatever else I was sort of missing in the pieces, while I was piecing together all the elements which will then manifest as the time capsule of the future past, right? And so, my current position is, yes, absolutely, there is a reality, a real reality, a truth, and that is physical. And I also, at the same time, know that there is a simulation. But what people think in terms of what the simulation is, and what I've come to understand the simulation is, those are two pretty radical different concepts, two different ideas. And the way that I'm exploring it now, the simulation is associated with a lot of things that are going on in our world which are not natural, which I would call not natural. And that includes that basically encompasses the entire world picture as we know it. There is an explanation, in other words, is what I'm saying, that can serve us to decipher what the heck is really going on in the world. And not only that, to lead and point to the solution of how we can get rid of the distortion elements that are preventing us from seeing or living in reality. So I would say that we're both living in a reality and in a simulation simultaneously. And I want to explain that in some depth. So I'm going to keep that kind of a secret for now, because I think people are going to be blown away because of the sources of information that I've drawn upon to pull this information together are themselves mind-blowing, and people are going to get to know them. And so, yeah, I think there's a lot of very, very powerful information that's going to be coming out. And I feel that we're getting very close to solving the equation of what it is that we're here for.
You know what? I could sign what you just said. I could sign that statement. Say, even though I might not be 100% certain what you're alluding to exactly, but even just the way you described it very much resembles my experience, my research, and things that have been shown to me in altered states of being. Cool. So I think we are down to the main subject today, but I think it's deeply connected to what we just sort of prefaced
Well,
here with
yeah.
this, which is non-human intelligence, maybe as, you know, kind of the overarching theme, and then of course it goes down into other species, and especially disclosure, which is the process of humanity here learning about what all is out there and what has been maybe coming here, uh influencing us, even controlling us, all of that, right? So we have sort of talked about this over the years, on and off, but we don't have an official process right now on Earth that would sort of guide people through this. And you and I have both been studying this, you probably deeper than I, but what is the goal of sort of the disclosure movement at large, and where do we stand currently on the timeline of disclosure in from your point of view?
Well, ever since I got involved in it, and this goes back, let me see, in my own personal life. Of course, when I was a kid, I think when I was in 6th grade, I found a book on the Billy Meyer case. This Swiss one-armed, prodigy, which was having contact with a being called Simjazi from the Pleiades, and had all this photographic evidence. And there was this American team that had, with people like Jim Delatoso and others, that were involved in researching elements of his evidence to determine whether it was real or not. And I thought what they came up with was essentially saying we can't prove it isn't real. So that's a great way of saying it could be real, but we can't prove it isn't real. So let's just leave it out there. And so my attitude was, at that point in my life, I believe it's real, but I figure there's people that are going to solve that one, and pretty soon the truth is going to come out anyway. So there's no need for me to get into it. Of course, many decades went by, and I realized that the truth wasn't coming out about it, and I'd kind of lost touch with it until I got to the point where I was going to make a film. I was looking for a subject, and that film ended up becoming the film called Packing for Mars. And Packing for Mars was born out of the, sort of an evening of just kind of hop skipping around the internet to look for.
That's the alternative number 3 kind of deal, right?
Yes,
That's what this
was based on that came later. First, it was me hop skitching around and then I discovered this thing called the Barcelona Disclosure Conference, which had just been hosted the year before by two people, Americans one American and one Englishman, Bill Ryan and Kerry Cassidy, and they had actually became the godfathers. They became Project Camelot. They're kind of like godfather, mother of the whole disclosure kind of grassroots movement. And they were inspired, and again, by someone who preceded them by a few years, called Stephen Greer, Dr. Stephen Greer, who had actually a conference panel in Washington at the press conference house there, with huge mainstream medias there and lots of so-called witnesses and whistleblowers that were going to, it was like, heck, if the government's not going to talk about it, we are. And that's where I kind of first officially embraced the idea of something called officially disclosure. And disclosure, for those who don't already know it watching it, basically is the idea that the reality of the visitation of extraterrestrial beings or extraterrestrial technologies is undeniable, and the government knows it, but they're not talking about it. So we want them to. When are they going to come forward and finally admit what we all kind of already know is going on? And that was sort of, Greer kind of kicked off the more serious efforts to kind of force the government into a corner to reveal what's really going on, right? And of course, 2001 that's 23 years ago. So what has happened since then has been very interesting to observe, because it's been like it's gone and come in waves. But in a sense, there has not been, to this date, any official government position with respect to the extraterrestrials. And there's reasons for that. And you kind of learn that as you're navigating this territory. And that's kind of where we are now, I think. But we've noticed in the last couple of years, there's been an escalation, I would say, in tempo, an acceleration in urgency on that subject. And that in itself also is a very fascinating topic. We can talk about that as well. What do you think?
Well, I think the last 2 years have seen an acceleration in everything. I mean, it's like, life is as fast and as, you know, fast paced, and which on one hand brings us so much more knowledge in such a faster time. On the other hand, it also sometimes causes sort of things falling through the cracks that are actually important, but it's just a plethora of subjects, right? So I like the idea of taking a little bit of time here to really dissect this. For me, really, and this might be a little bit of a different approach, but for me, really, it is the exponential acceleration of technology that we're witnessing right now that tells me that this is sort of a soft disclosure to me, the technology. Because here's the thing: there's an interesting, not very well done in my opinion, but an interesting series on Netflix, which I just watched a part of because then I got kind of but it was a 3 body problem. And I don't know if you've seen it, but basically it's about a contact with a foreign civilization. They are in an unstable environment with 3, so their planet, and then 2 suns that, you know, simultaneously pull them into a stable and unstable constantly in this loop of unstable periods on their planet where they can't be outside. It's too hot and whatnot, and they're looking for a new place. They find Earth, and they establish over decades this contact and this plan, and they're still very far away, hundreds of years, but they're already preparing, beginning to prepare
Spoiler
for Earth.
alert!
For
Spoiler!
spoiler alert,
I
yeah.
started watching the first episode last night, so yeah.
So, but the kicker was really that when they talked about coming here, and I think I lost my train of thought while you said spoiler
Oh, I'm
alert.
sorry about that. I'm sorry.
Oh, no. Actually, here it is. Here it is. That was the thing, the technology thing. So basically, they said they were gonna assimilate the people on Earth and prepare them for their arrival. For them, when they come, they can peacefully coexist. But here's what they realize, or what humans on Earth realize, is the level of technological development in that civilization is significantly slower, although they're further advanced right now, but it is significantly slower than it is here on Earth. So here on Earth, they calculated by the time that they would arrive here, Earth would be technologically so far developed that it would outdevelop them by a lot. And basically that point stopped me in my tracks, because I thought, why? And to me, the only logical explanation is how we, looking at official history, got from the first car right around 1900, you know, to the AI capabilities that we know of and that we can use, you and I can use in 2024. That's 120 years. That's
Yeah.
nothing. And yet we have this. So to me, that is soft disclosure that alien or foreign technology is being infused. And so this is, I think we're reverse engineering it, if that makes any sense to you. I don't know how you see that.
Well, I mean, reverse engineering is the big topic around, you know, people like Bob Lazar and some of the whistleblowers that have come forward. Even the Dan Burrish Looking Glass chapter had a significant amount of reverse engineering to get access to that technology involved. So the reverse engineering subject is pretty much kind of the standard picture for those who believe in this contact scenario that has been happening. People's, you know, there's evidence that there's been these little anomalous appearances of whatever you want to call them, others in our environment for thousands of years. And it wasn't, you know, and the Stephen Greer, for example, takes the premise that it wasn't until we developed atomic bombs in the 40s and 50s that sort of took a turn from being kind of a clandestine background sort of appearance to actual, you know, involvement in a hands-on kind of a more active interaction between whoever they are and our planetary governments, leading, of course, to a war of kinds, like a standoff of kind, leading to crashed saucers, leading to then, you know, taking those technologies and trying to figure out how they work, which is the reverse engineering model, leading, of course, to what they call the breakaway civilization, which Richard Dolan, I think, coined that term, where you know, that group of people working with those technologies and with the knowledge, the conscious, distinct knowledge that they are actually dealing with these extraterrestrial elements leads them into another kind of existence altogether, which they call another society, a breakaway society, a breakaway civilization, which is dealing with technology which we would think is magic. And those people, and the discrepancy between when they started doing that and now, that has created such a huge divide that there is really literally two different societies living on our planet at this very time. One of them dealing with the technology and developing the technology, and then the rest of us, the others, who can only speculate. And then, of course, along with that, and this is what we saw at Contact in the Desert, you saw a dividing between people that are considered serious, hardcore researchers and authors, and those who are called experiencers, who are claiming to have had direct interaction with multiple, like really dozens of extraterrestrial species, which is one of the reasons why I got involved in producing that film, The Extraterrestrial Species Almanac, because it's almost unfathomable to think that not only is there one species, right, out there, but that there's not 2 or 5 or 10 or 12 or not even 50. There's dozens, right? And that seems, it might be a bit far-fetched. And so it leads you to the topic of, there's actually could be real situations happening in the world with respect to extraterrestrials, and there could be contrived, faked versions or misinformation deliberately put into the scene to confuse things, to keep to keep the plausible deniability in place for the government officials that know this, and they realize, okay, well, let's put the crazies out there, and that way nobody will know for sure, because you can easily debunk the crazies, right? All those people that have surfaced, that have claimed that they're on space elevators to Venus 2 times a week and, meeting up with blue avians and stuff like that. I mean, they have nothing to back it up. They're just telling you fairy tale stories, as far as I'm concerned, because they can't prove any of what they're saying. And that's a good distraction. And so the question is,
I agree. That's why we don't talk about this stuff on our channel, is not because it isn't possible that some of these accounts are true. It's because there's absolutely nothing to tie them to other than believing it. And we sort of want to go away from believing and find out what we can
yes,
know rather than what we want to believe. Believing can be your hobby, but what we do is not about it. It's about what can we know.
yeah,
And I want to just quickly stay in the observational realm, Frank, because maybe we can find an agreement on this. And this would be sort of talking about a species that is malevolent in a sense that it harms us. Maybe it's not their intention, but at least how it expresses. If you look at humans, animals, and plants, it is very obvious to us now what a good, natural, and healthy way of life would be, in harmony with nature, in harmony with each other. It's not hard to figure out. You just observe the cycles of nature, and you find your place in it, and you live with it, and that's the end of it. However, our life is the exact opposite. Society, civilization is going in the self-destructive direction every day more and more, and none of our actions make sense if we think that we're doing it for our own good. If we, however, assume that there is another species directing our actions because it serves them, maybe changing the makeup, the atmosphere of this place or whatever, then it wouldn't be far-fetched to believe that there already is a other species, whether maybe they were here before us, maybe they came back, I don't know. But is that sort of logical for you too, this train of thought that just by pure logic we might assume that it can't be humans doing all the self-destruction on their own?
John, I think that the answer to this question for me is absolutely clear. Yes, there absolutely is an external influence that has been here on this planet, meddling in the affairs of humans since, I would say, humans have been here. My only question, and the topic that I'm most interested in right now, which I'm exploring, is who are they? Right? Are they really extraterrestrial beings that have come here from a long, long way off? Right? From across other multiple, thousands of millions of galaxies out there. They would happen to find our little jewel, speck of grain of sand in the middle of a beach, in the middle of another beach, in the middle of another beach, right? Or is there another explanation for that? And you know, this is a very, very hotly contested topic. I got into some extremely hot debates with people at Contact in the Desert because there is what I would say I've observed since Tanya and I began the whole process of Packing for Mars, the film, and all the stuff that we've done since. I've watched, you know, from a time, this is going back to about my first filming took place, I think, in 2010. And the people that I was talking to that were protagonists in the film had a very kind of a certain ignorance of the bigger picture. They knew certain things that they had that were direct personal experiences, which I got them to talk about. But there were other things that they knew nothing about. And between that time, when those first filmings took place, and now about 15 years have gone by, and I've watched a whole ecosystem, a cosmology, for lack of a better word, that has emerged, that suddenly has not only not sure about all of it, but now has definitive characters. It has a definitive storyboard. There's a script. There's a whole like culture of entities.
All the hallmarks of a psyop, isn't
Oh,
it?
I'm telling you, like, this is the thing that I would get into the heated arguments about, because there is no denying that the people who are having these encounters, when you speak with them, they come across as totally credible for the most part. And so it isn't for me almost a question of whether they believe it or whether it's real or authentic. We were speaking earlier about simulation. And so, I mean, I know for a fact, and we've talked about this on some of our other shows in the last couple of years, I broke down some of the psyops that are going on with respect to technologies which are capable of implanting ideas into people's brains, right? We talked about Jose de Lagardo, you know, with some of the remote control, mind control experiments that were taking place starting in the 40s and 50s, right? That they can actually implant ideas and make you do things and make you hear voices and see things in your brain. So ever since that has become a reality.
Everybody knows MK Ultra by
Right,
now,
MK
so this is
Ultra
not
and all its multiple branches of whatever has developed and gone into the private sector and disappeared off the radar screen has been going on, and it's clear. So now that that's been 80 years, okay, we can no longer discount the fact that what these experiences that people are experiencing could fall into that category. Now, I'm not saying that every one of them are, and I know people would probably, and that's what gets people so upset at me and got them upset at me when I would posit this idea, right? It's just because it really requires you to have to let go of a certain cosmology that you've heavily invested into. And not only you. That's what I'm saying. When you're at these events, you discover that there's dozens of people, hundreds of people that have unquestioningly adopted this new cosmology. And for them, it's only about what book do I read that has it explained in the most streamlined way, so I just get to know on the same page as everybody else, right? So it's not about, hey, is that one true? Let me go into that aspect and spend 2 years digging it, right? Finding out, and then go to the next one. No, it's like, here are these 15 elements, and they've all like taken them at face value to be true. And and this is something that's very irritating. And it's also, I'm positive, irritating for those who are serious researchers who are trying to get the truth out there, because it creates
it most definitely is to me.
Right?
It most definitely is to me when I have a debate, like you say, a discussion, and somebody says, you know, this species came here and they were doing this, and then this came and then they fought and then and I'm like, okay, so you watch Star Trek or something, but what of this do you actually have any evidence for? Like, you know, anything, just anything that we can start tying it to. Oh, well, such and such researcher wrote this book and said this. Yeah, okay, but where is his freaking evidence? So I'm with you, and this is why I want to approach this subject. We can talk about opinions all day long, but with some seriousness, because I think we need to be adults and serious. From our observation, we can and with our logic, we can derive certain things. It just means it points us in a direction. There are phenomenons on this earth that you experience, paranormal stuff. There are places that you went that are known for it. There are what we might call portals. But these things we can actually find out, and we can come very close to solid evidence. So there is that. That doesn't mean it's extraterrestrial. It just means there's more to this experience than we think. But you found a guy, a former Army guy, Colonel Nell, and I think, let's just he seems to be a very credible source. I like his thinking around how this could play out, the disclosure thing, why they might not be doing things the way we think they should, how the information could come out. Do you want to go a little bit into Colonel Nell and what he's saying?
Well, yeah, I mean, Colonel Nell, the reason I actually flew that clip over to you is because, having now just freshly returned and have been around that whole scene again, and having, like, because I don't actually, counter to what people might believe, live in that world at all. And I'm sure I don't believe you do either. But we are the kind of people that will look at it and look at it seriously. So I do look at it, and I look at it very seriously, but my approach to it is more from another angle. But this guy, Nell, just by fluke, it was in my feed, and I decided to click on it because it was only a 20-minute clip or an interview that this SALT connection, at this conference that he was at, and the interviewer was asking excellent questions, and he was not letting him off the hook. And Nell, as a colonel in the actually his credentials are unbelievable, right?
Let me play the clip real quick.
Yeah, play it. People need to hear this because it's important, I think, right?
An honor to be here, and it's a fantastic event, and I'm glad to see a large bunch of folks that stuck it out to the end for this talk. So I was fortunate. I had a 4-year ROTC scholarship to Penn. I graduated with a degree in electrical engineering. The Army sent me overseas to do signal corps engineering projects, so I did a lot of strategic comm projects in Europe. I ended up working in Army Space Command. I commanded a satellite ground station, war trace to the Joint Chiefs. I spent some time at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. The Army ultimately sent me to get a master's in mechanical engineering, a master's in strategic studies, graduate work in computer science. I was on track to stay in, but I decided that I wanted to pursue more of a technical career, so I got out and ended up working at Bell Labs, which was a fantastic place. Unfortunately, I was there during the trivestiture that folks may be familiar with, where the company got split up. I left Bell Labs and ended up working in Lockheed Missiles and Space. I worked at Northrop Grumman. I've ran strategic technology programs.
Listen, Frank, I sped this clip up to about 180%.
And you didn't even get it halfway through, actually, just looking at it now.
This guy, I think this guy might be proof.
Yeah, right.
There are aliens, because it's too much for one lifetime, and he's not.
And he's dry. He's hardcore. Like he's an analytical thinker. He's not like crazies like we are that go into the left brain, right brain paradigms. No, he's very linear. Like he looks at what's on his desk, and and the thing that comes out is he's got zero doubt. Like
well, let's get to that. Let's play that clip together. I think this one's really interesting to listen to.
The $1 million question: do you believe that a higher form of non-human intelligence has visited this planet?
Right. So, non-human intelligence exists. Non-human intelligence has been interacting with humanity. This interaction is not new, and it's been ongoing. And there are unelected people in the government that are aware of that.
And so, Carl, that is quite a bold statement. I'm wondering, and I'm curious, how confident are you that that is true?
There's zero doubt.
Okay, I want to stop it here, and we can continue playing a little later. There's a few interesting statements in here. Number one, the unelected people in the government. That's a very important statement, and there's zero doubt. What's your take on his demeanor? I was looking for body language. I was observing him while he was pulling, all the credentials. And so I thought, okay, is there a change? Is there a change in his body language that would say, oh, now he's telling a story versus the truth? What do you think?
I didn't see it, but what I did learn from his language was he starts everything with so. Right? And so when you start, when you start a sentence like that, it triggers in your mind is a narrative that he's obviously been working around in his mind. When he says, so when we talk about this, blah, 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 so this aspect of the thing, he's triggering himself to.
It was pre-planned.
And this is not to deter from his credibility, because anybody who is dealing with this kind of evidence and this kind of information, they have to begin to piece it together in their mind. They have to come up with a narrative that fits their own belief structure within their own existence, or they won't be able to navigate in that world at all. So him saying and preempting all of his sentences with that word is a way for me that shows that he's carefully thought of all of these answers. And when you listen to him speak, there's no and but, and it's clear, it's concise, sometimes it's a 2-word answer. He's just right to it
Yeah.
because he knows, he's worked this material so much in his mind that, because he's embedded in it, that his answers are probably going to be exactly the same if you and I were to interview him a week later or a month later.
Well, also, given his background, he's a total professional in creating reports, answering to higher ups, and doing the kind of concise language thing where you have to take any concept and make it comprehensible for whoever's reading it that might not know anything about it. So I think this background has to be considered. This is, as you say, someone very serious. Now, you could say, well, people like that are injected always, everywhere, to drive certain narratives. But this narrative and this whole conversation is towards disclosure. The question is, will we get real disclosure? Will we get the watered down, whatever serves the government version? But maybe we can listen a little more to what he has to say about this whole thing.
Probably a better way to ask that is, how can the folks in the audience come to a common understanding of what this phenomenon is? And so there's sort of 2 tracks here. One is from first principles, and another is actually from the data. So let's take a look at the data. So we can look at some folks that have very high level access to information, like Paul Hellyer, who is the defense chief for Canada, has come out and said the same thing. We can look at Ham Eshed, the head of Israel's, or former head of Israel's Space Force, has said the same thing. Chris Mellon, Deputy Assistant Secretary for Intel, SAPCO, has essentially said the same thing. Lou Elizondo has said the same thing. David Grush has said the same thing. David Grush cleared for presidentially level material. So you're looking at people that are in a position to know this, and they're telling you the same thing. You could take a look at the Gang of 8 in the Senate and in Congress. So there's 2 members of the Gang of 8, Marco Rubio and Senator Chuck Schumer, that signed up to the UAP disclosure amendment last year that basically said they're not being told the truth and we need to push forward on that. So that's sort of an overview of some of the data. From a first principles standpoint, what's so unusual about this realization? There's billions of stars in the galaxy. Life here evolved in 500 million years, which is basically a blink of an eye. We've found planets around every star that we've looked at. It's likely that the universe is full of life.
All of this makes sense, right? I mean, what he's saying makes total sense. What is your take on his sort of, okay, so all these high-level people have said it. I don't think that's data, but I think it says something. What do you think?
Well, ironically, some of the people that he mentioned, they were actually CIA disinformation agents for a long time that have now come over to the other side. So you always got to, this addresses what you said earlier. Is this going to be a full disclosure? Is this going to be a spoon-fed version of what they want us to believe in terms of what is out there? And, I think one of the things that comes up in his talks, and that's not in a sense, that just mentioning these people is not, like you say, proof in and of itself. It's just these people do have, like Grush, for example, was making headlines last year because he said he came out and said they actually have artifacts that they've recovered, and he does have presidential briefing clearing, right? So he's up in that high office of the president, which of course those people who are into the ufology field know that the presidential level is by far not the top level. So,
as a matter of fact, presidents usually don't know shit
right,
about
exactly.
that.
So that in and of itself doesn't say much, but I think he's trying to sell this to a lot of people that are kind of just sort of moving into this terrain, tiptoeing toward the accepting an official kind of a narrative, and they seem to be rolling out people such as Nell that have higher and higher official credentials and are not hiding behind some pseudo fake, credentials that you can't trace, that they were in some black ops projects that you can't Captain Kramer and all these people, how they all called, like they appeared, and they said, oh, I used to be in this super secret program, and you can't find the program anymore, and they can't find no trace of it. And now we're finding people that are traceable, that actually have real bona fide records we can put our hands on. So it is, again, it's this tiptoeing toward it. And one of the things that he gets into, and I don't know if you have that clip here, or if we want to play it, but I think the key word in that clip that I'm looking for and that I wanted to talk about with you as well is something called catastrophic disclosure, which
I have it, but play yours.
Okay,
sure.
Here, I'll play this clip.
Play ping pong.
Yet the government itself has not formally disclosed. They've been very reluctant to do that. Why? Why do you think that is?
So there's 6 basic reasons, and this, again, you could draw this out from first principles. There's a national security reason. There's the lack of a plan. There's the potential for societal disruption. There's the possibility that there's some non-public agreement. There's the potential for misdeeds and the desire to cover up misdeeds. And there's just the basic organizational intransigence and lack of priority that might be associated with the topic. So all these things are factors. The issue is that really the national security issue subsumes all the others. And so there's an opportunity maybe to contract the national security issue similarly to what was done with nuclear weapons and nuclear energy, such that nuclear energy is not necessarily classified and is available to the public. But lack of a plan and the potential for societal disruption are key ingredients that would prevent any responsible leader from coming forward with information that they don't have the means to address in a responsible way. It would be irresponsible to do that.
Okay, so what you're saying is that you have absolute conviction that a higher form of non-human intelligence has visited this planet, that there are factions within our own government that know about this, yet we still don't have a plan, and they may represent a security issue. This may pose a threat to humans, yet you still believe that we should disclose. Is that right?
Correct, right. So there's really 3 reasons that trump all those others. And those others are basically valid, like I said. So the first issue is the moral right. The government exists for and by the people. And so the nature of reality is fundamentally not government information. People have a right to know the world in which we live, and the pursuit of happiness requires that knowledge. So that's sort of the first kind of overarching philosophical foundation for this. But, as a corollary to that, if there are misdeeds that were done, then they need to be remediated. If there's lack of proper oversight, which is suggested by some of the whistleblowers, that needs to be remediated. So the first issue is the moral issue. The second issue is being in a reactive mode is never preferable to being in a proactive mode. So reactive mode is basically trying to prevent disclosure. But failing that, you might get a situation where you have catastrophic disclosure that creates all the problems that you're trying to prevent. So a more balanced middle path of controlled disclosure is the best way to do this, which is, again, an argument for some amount of disclosure. And the third part is simply societal advance and global competitiveness. More brain trust needs to be brought into this topic in order to make progress and to improve society. And so all 3 of those things together trump the 6 other reasons for non-disclosure.
Yeah, so he's actually kind of laying it out, that they do have this in-between version where they're dishing it out gradually, right? So, but that term catastrophic disclosure was something I'd actually never heard before. I mean, not officially. And
no, me neither.
And there's actually, and the only other person I heard mentioning that word, believe it or not, and I mentioned him earlier, his name is Dr. Stephen Greer. And Stephen Greer was on an interview just not even a week ago. He was announcing something that he's created called the Disclosure Project Intelligence Archive. And I think we should look at that too, because what is that, right? What is Nell talking about when he says when the governments don't disclose what is going on, they're opening themselves up to potentially something called catastrophic disclosure. Well, catastrophic disclosure, as it turns out, and as it's defined by Stephen Greer, and I can play a couple of clips here from him, is actually something where they lose control and it sends kind of society into a spiral, into a catastrophe, a catastrophic form of transition, right? So let's see, do I have it up here? Exactly. The dead. He's talking about it here. I'll put this clip on. Hopefully this is the clip. Let's give it a quick listen.
About 3 years ago, senior people with the Senate Intelligence Committee asked me to help them get to the bottom of this. And I went into a SCIF, which is a secure compartmented information facility, and gave them an initial briefing. And they said, well, what more do you have? So we have everything.
Hold on. No, it's this clip.
That was an interesting one. Anyways,
but this leads to this whole disclosure data bank. But this one is the one where he talks about that word.
There's an entire team of people in the process of defecting from the upper echelons of these covert programs. They're talking about perhaps doing what they call a catastrophic disclosure, where they would just release to me and to the public video footage of the retrievals of ET craft and the downing of other craft and the reverse engineered craft that they test out at the black sites out west. Just before I was critically injured in October, it happened 30 days after I came back from a black site where I was on a classified helicopter over 2 sites where this team who wants to come forward have electromagnetic pulse weapons where they target both the ET craft and test the man-made UFOs. So this information.
It's a topic he's getting into. I'm not going to play the whole clip because it's too long. But what he's mentioning by catastrophic disclosures, there's a group of people, and Nell, to me, represents kind of the moderate version of those people that are actively trying to figure out how to crack this nut of bringing this information out there, because there are teams, as Greer mentions, and this is kind of, I mean, he goes on to talk essentially about this team that wants to come forward that are working on EMP weapons designed to take out both extraterrestrial craft and human-made extraterrestrial rebuilt reverse engineered craft. So, you know, and this is I mean, the way he's talking about it very frankly and clearly, you know, makes it clear that these people that they exist. This isn't a fairy tale. This is really going on. And even the idea that there's both versions of UFOs that are out there in reality is briefly touched upon by a statement such as his, when he says that he was actually flying over the doorway where they come flying out of the ground, where the man-made ones come flying out of the ground, versus the ones that they shoot down every other week that come over the area as well. Maybe that's one of the ones that I heard when I was sleeping at Area 51, you know.
Well, we have this whole idea of disclosure is also a sort of a schizophrenic one, because on the one hand, if one thing has emerged because of the last years is such a distrust in both the government and the mainstream media, right? So it's in a single digit. So the faith in the government and faith in the media is in a single digits almost everywhere in the world. So we have such an erosion of trust that what would it even mean if the government has been slowly coming out through mainstream media sources, where you had people on mainstream news channels talking about, you know, high level pilots and generals talking about unidentified aerial phenomena and aircraft and whatnot. It didn't mean as much as we thought it would. And I think it's because this erosion, because what most people say they pay attention is, well, when they come out talking about it, I don't believe a word, because they're lying to us. They're always lying to us. And frankly, can you blame them? What's the last event that you remember that the government and the mainstream media gave you a true full account about?
Exactly.
So that is the third variable in this equation is, what entity would be best equipped to disclose if we don't have freaking trust in the government? So could there be another way of disclosure, maybe?
Well, the other way of disclosure, to me, and you know, Tanya and I have obviously broached this topic for the last few years, and we talk about it and feel that in a lot of ways the disclosure is already happening, because it seems like there's this divide anyway in the world between people that are locked into the system narrative, that accept and adopt anything that's told to them by their leaders and trust them unequivocally, maybe there's been a little bit of a fracture in the believability of the credibility of those individuals that are at the top in the last 4 years because of what we went through. But by and far, there's still the majority of people out there that believe the official mainstream narrative. And there, you could tell them anything. You could put an ET right in front of their faces, and they'll just think it's a rubber mask, whatever, fake or something, right? They won't believe it. And it also introduces something called cognitive dissonance, which is that element where you're confronted with the truth that's so profoundly different from the reality that you've constructed from your own personal experiences and what you've learned, that you would rather go back to living, and the one you've built a whole social network around and that are connected with your family and friends to, and adopting that and being alone and being out there considered to be a nut job, to just, forgetting the truth and going back into the lie so that you're living in a safe, comfortable, normal zone of a socially accepted world. So there's those people out there. And then there's the people that are already skeptical, that do not believe what we've been told, but that are that are open to other experiences out there. And they know that this stuff is out there and you don't need to convince them. And, so it would be nice to have the official disclosure, but it certainly isn't necessary for them to have in order for them to believe in whatever it means that these beings supposedly from other worlds represent.
One of the most interesting thing that Colonel Nell said here in this clip, and one of the clips we played, was, for me, really, he said something beautifully. The government doesn't own reality. It doesn't own the definitions and explanations of reality. So it has no right, from a, let's say, constitutional standpoint, to keep pertinent information from people, although that's mainly what they're doing. But this, to me, was sort of it showed me that his heart seems to be in the right place, because that's the moral argument keeping this. So, but what I'm thinking is, and what you and I are seeing more and more, is in these fields that sort of first were opened. They were first opened by real researchers. All of the conspiracy fields, those were some hardcore people that did the real initial digging. And then it attracted sort of the crowd of crazies, a lot of them, that disillusioned with life, not stable, out of balance. And so they needed that as the scapegoat. And I don't mean to be rude, but that's a lot of sort of the first people that latched on. And then where we are now is, what I'm thinking is, people are moving with a lot of knowledge, with a lot of experience, are moving out of these government positions. They're moving out of these high-level positions. They're moving out of the military and the intelligence communities, and they are beginning to form their own projects in the private sector. And I think that is, to me, that's us, by the way. We haven't moved out of these positions, but we are in this private space where we're doing this. I think that is where we can hope for the greatest amount of truth versus any government sources. So how much of serious research have you been seeing around this subject on your travels lately, in your conversations? And if you had to guess how many species are here or have been here, we're in contact with, what would you say?
Ooh, that's a tricky question again. You know how to answer. You always know how to ask these questions, man. That just yeah. I mean,
What can
I
I say,
have to
man?
reveal my cards now. It's just, well, no, okay. It's like this. As far as the first part of your question, how many of people do I know or have I encountered that are serious researchers in this field, and where are they at? And it's funny enough, I stopped actually looking and following any of the works of any of the research, because when I was into it heavily, I found essentially that formula, that there are those who I can take seriously, who are humble and down to earth, for lack of a better word, have their feet on the ground, even though they're looking into the stars, and are positing things in a certain way that makes it plausible. And then there are those who are deliberately out there telling fairy tales. And so I pretty much resigned to the position that I'm going to keep my ear to the ground. In fact, the fact that I edited and produced, the Extraterrestrial Species Almanac documentaries is proof that I'm that I'm earnest enough, interested in the subject, so that I'm able to allow people, and there are people in this film that are going to tell you some stories that are very wild and very crazy. And I think I fulfilled this very well. I didn't put my own personal bias on any of it. I actually extracted the message of what these people are saying. And Tanya and I, distilled it down to the essence of what these people are saying without trying to impose any kind of a personal attitude on it. And yet at the same time, I still have a healthy, a doubt toward, what is real and what isn't real. And the question that's come up for me more than anything in the latest time is that, and I think you've, also partly, observing you going through the end of religion kind of talks that you're going through. One of the things you have to admit, John, having gone through that, and we haven't talked about that at all. Okay, this is totally on the fly, but I would absolutely venture to bet that one of the conclusions that you've drawn from your discovery is that it's possible for human beings to develop entire storylines and faith-based structures that expand out into the world and become financially powerful and influential, to the point that they steer the world in a specific direction, while at the same time having literally no credibility whatsoever at the root. So
you're that's basically our current civilization.
that's what I'm saying,
Now.
right? So you have to be able to
that's-
project that concept on top of here to know that, look, are there dozens of them out there? Or is it possible that, when you're watching a science fiction film, for example, whatever it is, you mentioned one, the 3-body problem, right? Isn't it incredible how believable the characters are, and how well thought through the storylines are, and how consistent? Now, in the worst case, they're not consistent. They have stupid plot lines that don't make any sense. But the best ones are contained and consistent within the entire story, so that you come out with the moral of the story and you believe it. And it has an absolute credibility and believability within its own little ecosystem. And when you realize that, and you realize that the human imagination is so powerful, we're such geniuses, that it is actually possible for us to invent entire ecosystems that are based on fiction and have the rest of the world believe in them, even though they are not true. Right? That's a major, major, major cognitive dissonance that the world may have to swallow on its journey from being world 2.0 or 1.0 to world 2.0, the new earth, whatever. We can't bring those fictions with us if we're talking about moving into a new world that is based on truth. And Tanya and I were invited on a panel after disclosure to be talking about what we think will happen after disclosure, right? And that was my point, is like, I can't wait after disclosure, whatever that form it takes and whatever it means. For me, it means that we're going to finally find out how much of the stories that were out there were absolute BS, misleaders, entertainment, and how much of them were true. And, because only then, when we know what the truth is, will we know what direction we're facing. Until then, we're turning in all kinds of directions, thinking this is true and that's true. And when we want to move forward, well, what is forward then? Is it forward from the history that's correct, or is it forward from the history that's completely false, and moving, of course, into another false direction, right?
It's absolutely astonishing, Frank, how your stream of thought and my stream of thought are once again completely synchronized on this. And this is, I think, because when you have gone out and when you have researched all the rabbit holes, some of which are just bullshit, they're just created holes. And when you go down so many of them, you start to realize that you need to go within and you need to first calibrate to what the energy of truth is. Otherwise, you're just confused on this journey. But when you calibrate to what truth is, then you start looking at things from a much more balanced standpoint, and then you go, okay, let's look logically at some of the things that tells me, like I said before, that we are disrupted by a species that must be different than we are, is also I see it in the way that they're fighting us. If you have to poison absolutely everything, the food, the water, the air, the soil, what we see and hear, the entertainment, everything that is brought to us is poisoned. And it's meant to bring us to a lower vibration, to make us sick, to make us stupid. So that alone tells me there is a species that has to do that in order to be able to control us for whatever means. They have to do that. What's the flip side? That we're so incredibly powerful that they are not better than us. They have to make us worse than them so they can control us. Maybe we are way more developed. Maybe we have something they're lacking, and which I think we do. So there are so many indicators to me in our observable reality that point in this direction. However, I don't want to exclude
Right.
the benevolent and the good and the well-meaning and the friendlies. They must be there too. I mean,
Yeah.
logic would conclude that. What are some of the benevolent, the friendlies, maybe, or what could be, looking at all your research, what could be a species maybe that you feel is friendly towards us and is helping us?
Well, I don't know. I wouldn't really want to give them a name because, I think that would be a mistake. I think nobody knows really. But I do think that,
Okay.
that these kinds of species, if they're out there, and the idea of creation, whichever form, a creation narrative, and most people, follow the narrative of the Big Bang, or that there was the creator God and whatever. The narrative, whatever one you follow, if you can accept that there's the human experiment, and then there's other experiments that took place in other, areas of the universe, and considering that there are these multitude billions of other galaxies which are being discovered, and the whole new science that interests me, in fact, more than the Big Bang Theory, which I find completely obsolete and unsubstantiated, because the more you look at it and the more you break it down, the more flaws you find in it, is the electric universe. And the electric universe ties into something which I've been exploring a lot since even the Inner Looking Glass webinar, which is the idea of the microcosmos versus the macrocosmos, meaning that everything that happens on us on a very microcosmic level within our bodies is reflected also on the macro scale. And that, what we consider neurons firing in our brain, taken on a larger scale, on a greater scale, out into the cosmos and reflected in terms of plasma and energy lines, which they're now finding. They're now finding that there are these actual network of energy lines that are filled with plasma dust, so small you can hardly even measure it. But it means that there's information, because electrons are traveling along these lines. It's almost like a giant neuron brain system that the universe comprises, filled with these networks of energy, which are traveling lines of electrons, and electrons are information. Electrons hold and store all of the information of experience and reflect it back at us like a feedback loop for us to continually evolve as a universe. And so for me, those beings that would be candidates for coming here would be beings that would decipher these networks, that would figure out that there are networks and figure out where they lead. And not only that, taking it one step further, finding a way to determine or identify sentience on another scale other than just the actual networks, that there's actually a concentration of an organized energy field which manifests as a genome called humans, and finding it and following those networks to get here and to meet with us. But the main problem with them being here and interacting with us, I think, is that we have to always keep in mind that we have something here called free will. And where do you draw the line between an entity coming here from another sector of the cosmos and telling us, what to do or what it's all about, and therefore, actually impeding our own natural experiment from evolving on its own natural terms, right? Because there's got to be certain laws that are in place that guarantee that we have the right to make mistakes as well, and that we have the right to evolve. In fact, humans, as it turns out, have that unique feature. They can learn by mistakes. And if you don't make the mistakes and don't let them go on,
We're proving that every day. We're proving that every
well,
day.
yeah, and the difference and the difference between what the Gnostics said, they don't believe in evil. They said they believe in error, and the errors that have gone unprotected or uncorrected, they are the ones who develop into evil. And so, figuring out that we learn from errors is one thing. Learning to discover where error has turned into manipulated evil is another thing. So we have to be allowed to correct those errors on our own in our own human experiment. So if some other alien species comes here and robs us of that, what is that doing to those creators who actually made this experiment to begin with, right? See, these are some of the issues that come up. It's not such an easy, simple, oh yeah, the extraterrestrials are here, let's party, man. You know, like I got some beer, so do you, right? No, it's very, very complex information here that we're talking about. So if there is some kind of a being that comes here and is interacting with people, it may likely only A, be on the astral plane, or B, might be isolated cases where certain individuals have been singled out to be those who are being prepared in kind of a school for future human consciousness, so that when and if that moment comes, when we break a certain threshold in our consciousness, and that opens the door naturally to these beings surfacing and interacting with us, that we have people that are available around us that are human, that can help brief us into what's really going on, that are not part of that government branch, which you mentioned earlier, which we ask ourselves, when have they ever told us anything that is truthful, right?
You know, there's also this, and this has to be sort of understood and agreed upon, is that we have to overcome our perceived divisions and differences, which that is why I keep saying that the solution that comes from outside of us is futile to our existence. And, you know, if you look at the various tribes that have lived on Earth undisturbed until the civilized people came, the ones that were unified in their principles and culture remained intact. Some of them managed to remain intact. The ones who didn't have quite that unity anymore, they were disrupted and initially, essentially deleted from Earth. I mean, they're not there anymore, or just diluted down. And so we have been played against each other for so long. And right now there is a fast-paced agenda at work to reduce most of us, and to, in a fake way, through technology, pacify the rest of us, so that we submit to this new order that's playing out. And on paper, it looks like, oh, we're going to be a unified human species, and finally we can enter sort of the greater galactic journey. But it's not true, because that's not based on a real authentic development. It's based on one fake state to another fake state to another fake state, which to me leads to just another cataclysm event. It can't be any other way. So I think what you and I are doing, what so many of us are doing, is hopefully creating enough space so the human experience can come to this unification factor, because ultimately we need to get over our petty differences of left and right and bullshit and religion, and realize that we are one species, one family, inhabiting one space, and that there are very clear indicators as to what a proper way of life and harmony is, and what isn't. So I don't think we can begin interacting intelligently, collectively, with other species until we have our shit together. Do you see it the same way?
Oh man, brother, you're speaking my language. You know, and another thing that I don't even need to repeat anything. Everything you just said is just so on the money. I don't even know. All I can say to add to that is that I think that it's sad that many of the people in the ancient alien astronaut kind of camp immediately look at the wonders on our planet as being created by extraterrestrials. And they don't even know the real history of Earth, really. Okay, they don't even know the real history of the 20th century, as I'm learning. So here we have things like the pyramids and Göbekli Tepe and all these different structures around the planet, which are a miracle. They shouldn't exist, because apparently we didn't have the technology to produce
We still
them.
don't have it.
But what if that's not true at all? What if there were human civilizations that preceded ours, and they just succumbed to a cataclysmic cycle, which we know exists, right? There's a cataclysmic cycle which takes place. It's a great reset, you might call, of another kind altogether, a natural great reset, which seems to be in place, which has to do with kicking the butt of human consciousness every so often back to the Stone Age to start over again and try to do it again, this time fix it. And we get further maybe every single time we do it. And we find the remnants of those. What if those remnants of Stonehenge and the pyramids and things out there that we see are actually not anything that's supernatural? They actually came from us. And we actually do have amazing paranormal abilities. You talked about it before. We have the ability to move things, to lift things, to telepathically communicate. We have people in our civilization now that can do it. They're the precursors of what is going to be the normal state of what human consciousness is capable of doing once we embrace these things on a larger scale. So all these things stand before us, and in a lot of ways, it also ties into the argument of the timeline with transhumanism versus the natural organic timeline. The transhumanist timeline is the one that sells us short of what those natural human abilities that are undeveloped on a larger scale in our society are all about, that stands before us for us to embrace. What if we lose that opportunity because we sell ourselves short to the technocratic universe of the transhumanists before we blossom into who we really are this time around?
Holy shit! At the 120 mark, Frank really hit the gas pedal here. I love how you put that, and there are, I think, maybe it's not clearly defined, but there may be two opposing views here. There are the ones who are sort of in the waiting position, and they go, okay, we can't be the best possible version of ourselves until we have disclosure. And I'm saying disclosure is a natural result of becoming the best possible version of ourselves. Because honestly, uh, if you were an evolved species from another system, and you come here and you just observe shit, you go, that don't make no sense. What you guys are doing makes no sense. You're fighting amongst each other, families fighting families in the same space. You're polluting the very river that your neighbor's going to drink from, and your neighbor up the road is polluting the river at his point where you're going to drink from. Everybody loses. So would you go and say, hey, by the way, this is us and we're just a few stars over, why don't you come visit? They wouldn't do it. It doesn't make any sense. So I think becoming the best possible version of ourselves is the key issue for anything and everything that we really want to discover, or truth. And I think that's when truth reveals itself to us. So that's why my personal stance was always, I'm not too worried about spending my days researching aliens. I figure that when this subject becomes so pertinent for me, it will appear in front of me just like everything else. And so I think that's how I steer these waters. But so maybe we're almost at the 90-minute mark. What would be your suggestion to people who are deeply invested in the subject, who are waiting for the arrival, and who think that aliens might be the answer to all of our problems?
I would recommend that they practice kind of a mental hygiene that involves them studying the source of the information which they have, which makes them to tend to believe that there is this extraterrestrial presence, that there is this other world out there which most people don't know about, which they want to believe in, which is being withheld from us, and compare it to a more organic kind of a human, what the real human potential and the growth and development of humans is on a spiritual level, and see if maybe the one storyline that is encompassed and embodied in that narrative is really just a symbol for where humans are going on a spiritual level. And that maybe these beings, just to be open to the idea that these beings and these manifestations and these storylines that have developed and evolved on the planet are telling us something about our inner psyche, about the human psyche, that we need to learn. And, because it is really, maybe spend also a little bit more time learning about the real history of this planet, including the real historical, narrative versus the mainstream historical narrative, which has been used to manipulate and keep us down and to keep us away from the critical thing, which you mentioned earlier, that we embrace and understand that humanity is one huge family. There isn't anyone who's better or worse. We're all in this together. We are all the chosen ones. Humanity is. And this is, where we're going. And we need to maybe develop tools to understand what that means. And maybe part of the tools that we're developing to get there is this UFO mythology. Now, and at the same time, we have to be also open-minded to the fact that, yes, there are these cases of things that apparently have crashed. People have gathered them,
Plenty.
that they're building stuff with them, that they're using them. What are they using them for? We don't know. Hopefully it's for benevolent things, but most likely not. Or, equally chances are that they're not being used for benevolent reasons. And just, embrace that truth if it comes as well, so that we're not absolutists in that sense. Because, we don't really have the answers. We're still trying to figure out the truth of the human experiment. And we're still trying to decipher where the manipulation started and where the truth started and where the overlap is, and what, what framing is all about, and whether something that was maybe a manipulation may be used to help us catapult ourselves into the truth. And so it's not all that bad. So in that sense, judgment of something out there to carry a negative energy forward is also not very constructive. I don't know if any of that made any sense, but
it makes total sense to me. And the whole idea of framing something, when you are in your inner world and you are deeply immersed in thought, you can go into unlimitedness in your thinking. When you're in a conversation, you can't do that. There is no way a conversation can unfold if you have no framework. But the framework isn't supposed to be the thing. It's supposed to help you bridge gaps between observational points, so you and I can have an intelligent conversation that hopefully together we arrive at an advanced point from where we started. So that to me is what a frame is for, and that's the only way that it serves us. Once we get there, we don't need it anymore. We can broaden the frame too. So this is, I think, how we evolve in our collective co-creation here. But there are things that we know, or I think we know, exist that are fantastical and that would help humanity in a big way, like, for example, free energy or the access to almost unlimited energy. But here's the thing: if I were in charge of that, I would not roll it out either right now, because we would destroy each other within a week because there are still enough hypnotized and evil-minded people out there that will use anything that they can to advance their agenda and harm others. So until we progress from that current low levelness that a lot of the thinking is in, I don't think we can responsibly deal with the kind of potential that lies in such technologies. That's at least my stance. Frank, you are working on something amazing. And it's almost you're in the finishing stages. The time capsule for the future past, which is your new webinar. I know lots of people already used the pre-sign up link and the discount. Give us just a little bit more of what's going to happen there, and when's it going to drop?
Well, I was already alluding to it a little earlier. Just this last month of travel, of course, and in some ways, it took me away from my production suite, where where I put all these things together. And by the same token, I did experience some amazing things that brought some pieces of the puzzle to this webinar that I never had before, that just came. That probably never would have come if I hadn't have gone through that journey. And so that journey brought a lot of gifts. And now I'm back here and I'm I'm just going through and I'm putting all the little pieces together. And I've just, in the last couple of days even, I had a kind of a denouement, like my head blew open with some understanding of something that is one of the keys toward understanding what really is going on in the world right now, with respect to what I'd already begun in the process of creating the material for the time capsule for the future past webinar. So it's, I get goosebumps every now and then when I try to visualize the final result. What makes me most anxious I pray that I find the perfect way to deliver the information in the most sensible, cohesive, and thought-provoking way possible, that introduces people to things that they need to know, because I want it to be something very constructive. I think this is going to have the potential to change the planet. And
I wouldn't think anything less of your creations, my friend.
Thanks. And the people that did the and enroll, that signed up, I'm extremely thankful to them for having done it. and that window expired. But I was thinking before I came on today that maybe I should, for the Inspired Tribe, it's kind of unfair. Here we have another show coming out before my webinar is going to be out there, and if they want to also contribute or get a discount on it, I'm going to offer them 10% as well. So if you think you're interested and you check out the trailer and it speaks to you and you want to do this and you want to get a little discount, you can use the Inspired Tribe 10 code on a link that John will put below this video to sign up and gain the benefits as well, and thereby, of course, give me the final push for the final post-production on this thing. But I think this is going to be something totally mind-blowing, and I just I feel humbled in possession of the information. I've had people contribute to this webinar who are absolute masters, and I've been able to sit at the foot of those masters and by asking very directed and intelligent questions toward solving this puzzle, we've been given a very powerful gift, and I think that's what this time capsule is going to be.
Man, that's fantastic, Frank, and you're so right. Although I won't take the credit for putting the links in there and displaying it all. This shout out to our wonderful editor, Chris. She's going to do that and make it all look pretty and amazing like she always does. Also on the outro of the show, we're just going to play your trailer again.
Cool.
For the webinar, which I think the trailer just already pulls you in. It was a fantastic trailer, probably one of your best. And I can't wait. I've been kind of bugging you. Send me the rough. In the music world and in the movie world, there's this. It's called the rough mix in the music world. Just send me the rough. I can see through it. But Frank's been very, very clandestine and hasn't sent me anything yet. So I'm gonna keep bugging him. And then sometime in July, maybe early August, probably this thing's gonna drop. Right.
That's right.
Fantastic, Frank. I think we covered a lot of ground today, and to me, it feels good because we haven't put anything out there that is sort of belief system based. I think it's very grounded, balanced, something that people can walk with and put their own thoughts to it. I think we should observe this subject. Every time I see people like Dr. Stephen Greer, I have gratitude for his work. At the same in the same moment, I don't know if I fully trust it, and I probably shouldn't. That as a researcher, I shouldn't fully trust it. I should verify it. But I think this disclosure thing, it's going to happen more individually than collectively at first. I think more and more people will have an experience that they can actually verify, an experience that they can actually prove or to themselves. And that might be maybe the way to go. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. And I think for people that want to, Stephen Greer, as you mentioned, he's got both a stellar reputation in some camps, and also people are, skeptical of what he's done because of some of the statements that he's made with respect to the so-called ETs he's talking about. But one of the things you got to give him credit for is his relentless, staying on the ball. And he was mentioning in that clip that I put on and cut off briefly, he was talking about the Disclosure Project Intelligence Archive. And there's a website called dpiarchive.com, which he's made it available to the public. So if you want to dig around in the archives that Stephen Greer has made public out of all the years of research that he's done, it's freely available. I was there, I tried to sign in. There was a glitch with the sign in, but maybe they've fixed that by now. But, I think that's a good starting point that we can lead people to who want to go and maybe embrace a body of evidence that's out there put together by one of the main faces of disclosure that has been out there, under the caveat that, of course, we can't guarantee the authenticity or the genuineness of any of that information. But anybody who's got a discerning mind and is able to use deductive reasoning, which I think the Inspired Tribe is filled with types of people, will easily be able to navigate through that information. And it might be very, very useful and resourceful and how it's pieced together. So I think I agree with you that the disclosure thing is a reality of some kind. There's no point in putting a kind of a shape to it. But clearly, I think what we've shown today, and with those clips of both Greer and Nell, is that it's a subject which is not going away. It's going to be taken more and more seriously by the official channels And so we have a lot of interesting stuff to look forward to, I'd say.
Man, I can't wait. And for those extraterrestrials who are watching and who are tuning in today, I just want to say I'll come visit. But I hope you have horses, guitars, and bonfires. I mean, that's just that would do it for me. What about you, Frank? What would you need to go on a different planet?
Oh man, I guess it would be, they have there's a special beverage they make in Bavaria called Weissbier.
Oh yeah.
And
There you go.
not that I don't really, I'm not a quantity drinker. Like, I don't drink quantity, but if you want to drink a good smooth beer, the
Yeah.
Bavarians have perfected that. That would be kind of a shame. And, red wine, I think without red wine, it would be difficult to kind of survive any excursion to another planet. And for me, the instrument of choice would probably be some kind of a percussion instrument. I would enjoy playing the drums in some far off canyon in another world to hear the echo off the canyons, of that powerful rhythmic sound that we humans have developed in our genome and our evolution here on this planet.
All righty, man. Well, you bring the beer, the wine, and the drums. I'll bring the guitar, and we'll ride into the sunset of this planet and play around the bonfire. Frank Jacob, the Naked Truth Show. I love this format. I love the banter. I love going back and forth, the expansion. So I'm going to nail you on this. We promised when we started this, okay, we're going to do a monthly rhythm. We eventually want to get to a bi-weekly rhythm. So what do you think? Do you think we got it in us to do it now?
Well, we might have to do one more monthly, but I think after that we'll be switching to bi-weekly.
Look at this guy. Look at this guy just pushing and pushing. Man, come on.
Look,
man.
you know what?
You
It's
can
better
do
for me
it.
to surprise
Please.
you. It's better for me to surprise you and say, guess what?
Yeah.
Just do this, right? And there
Okay,
might be
Inspired
something
Tribe.
that's coming up, right?
Inspired Tribe. Here's what you got to do. If you want the bi-weekly rhythm, leave a comment. Let us know in the comments if you want that. If we can get at least 200 comments that says bi-weekly rhythm
Oh man.
or every other week, however you want to word it, then Frank's got to do it. I mean, he can't go against your wishes.
You are mean. You are a mean man. Maybe 200
brother
people
Frank.
didn't even watch the show. That might be my best luck here, or best disluck.
Oh no, that's not that's not happening. Hey, before we log off here, Frank, where can people keep up with you? Where do you post stuff? Where can they find all your work?
Well, I guess the best place, or easiest place to get to me is if you remember my name, Frank Jacob, FrankJacob.com. Then you'll just go to that site and you'll find links at the top there to get to anything, including YouTube. I also have my own YouTube channel, which is sorely neglected because John hijacks me away to do all these shows. But maybe we can do all the B-roll on my channel, and that of course leads you to the CyberHive place where the webinars are, the courses, and the Facebook stuff. If you want to connect with me on Facebook, and you'll find a contact on frankjacob.com at the bottom, a form you can reach me. I get all those emails, I read them, and I apologize in advance for those who have written me and I haven't gotten back to them yet. I do read as much as I can, and I flag things for getting back to, and I hope to get back to all of you. And I'm sure it's probably similar in your world, John, with respect to answering people. I'm thankful and I'm humbled that so many people think I'm important enough to write and share information with, and I hope I can do it justice and honor the information that they're passing along to me in the future.
Yes, absolutely. Same here. We so appreciate every comment, even if it's sometimes criticism. That's fine. It's all good. But yeah, same here. And we try to, but I simply can't commit to answering every email. And thankfully, it's all within the family. So there are people who are reading literally every email, which is wonderful to me just to know it's getting acknowledged. And then there's a filtration system. But at any rate, thank you all so much for tuning in. Thank you for writing, commenting, pushing Frank to do the bi-weekly, signing up for his webinar, Time Capsule of the Future Past. And thank you for joining us in the Naked Truth.
We should mention one thing that people will not get upset, because I'm only offering this pre-sign up until the summer solstice. So look
so
up the
that's a
date
few
of the
days
summer
from now.
solstice. It's right to the minute.
Okay, well, I get it. So hop on it now, pre-order it, and then enjoy it when it drops. It's going to be, I know it's going to be earth-shattering, and then eventually changing. I know from what I just gathered, it's going to be shattering. So Frank, my brother from another mother, thank you so much for joining me again for the Naked Truth Show.
Thanks for
brother.
all you do too, John. It's always an honor and a pleasure, and I hope we get more than 199 people watching.
Amen. Inspired Tribe, we love you. We appreciate you. We'll be back with you again very, very soon.
The ideology and even the ethics of Christianity and Judaism from the get-go were corrupt and were nothing but tools for political aims. The thing that each one of us needs to realize is that beliefs drive behavior.
People join forces to conquer empires, to fly to the moon, because they all believe in the same God, in the same nation, or in the same money.
How can we change the behavior of people who are still to this day torturing and burning other people in the name of God? We have to look at the beliefs that drive that behavior. This is the big test that we're facing right now, and I think we're in the final phase of that test.
When you go back in time, footnote by footnote, old book and out-of-print book by out-of-print book, you find the history looks very different from the one that most of us learned.
This is history's hardest lesson, where many people have enshrined their sacred values and their sense of human dignity. Judaism, Christianity, Islam is actually not religion at all. It is a political system of social control, brainwashing, and tyranny.
The entire system is based on the fact that everybody believes this story.
The question becomes, who won?
We have to defy and cast aside those belief systems which are being used to decimate the world and to desecrate the earth.